Alright everyone, making a little video or recording again today, and today I'm going to talk about free will and the concept of free will and whether or not I think that this concept is applied in the real universe, in real life, so to say. And I will do this because, as any other person, or most people, I think, I'm very curious about human existence and human purpose and how we came to be and what is our objective and so on and so forth. All those questions that you think about when you're taking a shit or showering, that sort of stuff. So, what do I think about free will? And bear in mind that I think in order to discuss free will, you need to have a certain comprehension of physics and of chemistry. Well, more physics than chemistry, really, because even chemistry is physics if you boil down the subject. But anyways, what do I think about free will? And bear in mind, this is coming from a person with a layman knowledge of physics. I don't think there is any sort of free will, and I think that the universe might actually be predetermined. The only thing that makes me think otherwise is random elements in the universe. And when I'm talking about random elements, I'm talking about truly random elements, okay? So, position of the electron, stuff that happens in the quantum world, in the quantum scale, all right? So, and then that obviously impacts the macro scale world. Now, talking about free will, let's start with an analogy, okay? Let's picture this very simple system, which is a closed system. That means there are no transfers of matter or energy between the system and the outskirts of the system. And this system is composed, let's imagine that is very similar to the surface of the Earth, okay? And so you have a surface, and the surface has a friction coefficient. That means that it has drag, okay? It has a gravitational pull, okay? In this surface level, there is a certain gravitational pull, and in this universe there also is a particle, a perfect particle, okay? So it's kind of a perfect sphere, if you can picture that in your head, which interacts with other things in this system. So in this case, it's going to interact with the surface through friction and with the gravitational pull of whatever thing the surface is in. Okay, so let's make a prediction. Okay, because that's what science is for. Science is a wonderful tool that allows us to make predictions. And so let's make a prediction. I insert a force into this universe, into this system, and this force is going to be exerted on the particle. And taking in consideration the strength of the force and taking in consideration how it is projected onto the surface, you can make a reasonable estimation, or actually you can even make an almost absolutely perfect estimation as to where that particle will end up. So all you need to take into account in this, so you will make an equation, okay, to see where the particle will end up. And in order to draft this equation, you need to consider very simple factors. So you need to take in consideration the mass of the particle. You need to take in consideration the force of gravity that's being exerted onto that in that particle. Okay. You need to take in consideration the coefficient of friction of the surface that the particle is going to be moving through, and you need to take in consideration the force that's being applied to that particle. And so you will end up with a fairly simple equation, and this equation will allow you to calculate where that particle will end up. Okay? So now let's put it into a more reasonable situation that we can encounter in our actual universe. So now let's exert this force onto a rock. Now, obviously, there are going to be a lot more a lot more factors to take in consideration when you're trying to predict where the rock will end up when you calculate these forces. Why? Because in the Earth you have an atmosphere. Excuse me. I just drank a beer and I burp a lot when I drink drinks that are gassy in nature. So, okay, back now. I'm kind of lost. Yes. When you take in consideration the fact that the Earth is a much more complex environment, because you obviously have the atmosphere that's going to have drag, then you have various currents in the atmosphere, you also have variations in the quantum fields, obviously, because there are always going to be variations that are going to happen spontaneously. It's a much more complex universe to study, okay? But this is a rock, and it's a fairly simple object in our universe. Now let's try and translate it to a much more complex object. A human, okay? So a human, can we predict the behavior of a human? And when I say that I can predict the behavior of the human, taking in consideration the actions, the forces that are being exerted onto that human, and the reactions that are being exerted onto that human or that are happening in that human, then I can say that I can make a reasonable prediction, and as such, I don't think there is free will. Because if I can make a prediction of the outcome, an exact prediction, then there is no other way to be. So how can you have free will if there is only one outcome to a certain set of circumstances, okay? Now, I believe that the fact that we think we don't have free will is because the equation that it takes to predict human behavior, and now we're talking about behavior, right? We're not talking about putting a human in a catapult and throwing him or her, you know. I don't want to be sexist, even though I would think that a woman would prefer not to be included in this gender equality circumstance where she will be thrown off a catapult. But, well, anyways, it's a fairly simple thing to do. Now, when you talk to calculate where the human will end up, even though there will be, for example, the human will not stay still, you would be kind of panicky if you were flying through the air to a certain doom. You'll be wavering about, and that waving of the hands and the limbs and so on and so forth would cause drag through the air, which would change the path of your body, and so you could not make an exact prediction of where you would end up. But I would say otherwise, because I would say that taking in the past actions that took place in your brain, so we're talking about chemical reactions, you can make a reasonable prediction as to what movements you are going to make. And as such, you can calculate the drag that those movements are going to have on the air, so you'll end up with it. But you can see that I'm talking about a lot of stuff that we need to calculate. So the reason that I believe that we cannot, or that we, instinctively don't have the rationalization that free will is not a thing, is because the equation that it takes to calculate and to predict human behavior is so big, so monstrously big, and so complex. Well, it might even not be that big. It can be boiled down to, certain, a much more simpler equation. But it's so complex in nature, in its raw state, that you just don't get a feeling that things are predictable, that your behavior is predictable. But I say that we are no different from a rock when it comes to the forces that are being exerted onto us and the chemical reactions that are happening within us and in our surroundings and so on and so forth. So I would say that, for example, a rock is really no different from a human. If you throw a rock, you can calculate where that rock will end up. Now, the human would obviously have a bit of a panic attack and would start wavering about, and that would, as I've said previously, change the path. But you could calculate that as well, because what makes those movements is chemical reactions happening in your brain. And I'd say you can predict these chemical reactions based on past events that have happened. Because things don't just spur into existence, unless we're talking about quantum mechanics here. But obviously we have no impact on quantum mechanics whatsoever, as far as we know. There obviously are those woo-woo scientists. I use that term very liberally. This is such a massive topic that I can get lost. I truly apologize. But yeah, I mean, I really don't know how to. It's even a hard thing to express the concept of we having free will, because there are so many thoughts crossing my head that I want to express, but there are so many circumstances. The equations are so big that expressing all the variations that can happen is absolutely impossible. But I hope that you can see where I'm trying to go, right? Okay, am I making myself clear? I don't know. Okay, in my head this makes sense. I may be completely off, completely dumb, completely schizophrenic, thinking about this kind of stuff. But the rationalization that I make of this is that you can predict human behavior, because there is nothing special about us. We're just physical reactions and chemical reactions, and you can predict those, therefore you can predict human behavior. And if you can predict human behavior, you don't have free will, because there is only one possible outcome to one set of circumstances. Okay, this is the boiling down of all the babbling that I've been babbling about. Yeah, that makes sense. Alright, I'm going to shut up now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time, hopefully.